12 faceless bureaucrats decide your economic future. In secret. How much inflation should there be next year? What should interest rates be? How much of your savings should be transferred to politicians and their favored big banks? The Supreme Court, where individual rights are supposed to be protected, think it's fine if government invades our financial privacy, spies on us in our bedrooms, regulates church schools, and restricts our free speech. Meanwhile, at the Congress, everything is up for grabs, as long as it's yours.
I'm Pamela Wistrom, co-host of On Second Thought. And now, for the host and star of this 14-year weekly-long TV show. Oh, are you ready? The one and only William J. Wagner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pamela. Tonight, people, we have a show. We have the California 18, or most of them, here on the set. Unfortunately, a few of them were not able to be here tonight, but we have a large crowd here. Among the California 18 here, we hope you will get to know how to defend yourself against what I call the merciless bank gangsters. I'm not an expert, but we've got some people who are close as anything you're ever going to meet to an expert, each in their own specific field. So please pay close attention. With me as our first guest here on the studio is Jack Sooty. Thanks for being with us, Jack. Tell us what you want to tell us what we need to know.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen, for having all of the most of us, the California 18. What a pleasure to have us here as a group. I'm looking at you all for the first time together, and I'll tell you, it's an impressive thing. We are fed up with our judiciary and our prosecutors. We are here gathered because our hearts are pouring out to you, the listeners, to believe that there is corruptness out there going on with our titles, with our properties. They're being stolen, and we need to have your help with us getting the ear of the Attorney General to produce some prosecutions. We know for a fact that people are out there still to this day, after the settlements, after the agreements with the banks, that are still committing fraud. These are not misdemeanors. These are not petty offenses or infractions. These are felonious accounts that people are still doing, and nobody is getting prosecuted. We need to stop this. Our prosecuting agencies have a responsibility, and they've taken an oath to enforce it, and we're sick and tired of the fact they're not doing anything. I myself am a victim. I need to have some justice. I can't get it. For 4 years, I've been fighting my bank, and nothing's been done to prosecute the 4 felonies. Nothing. I've asked 3 agencies, San Diego County DA, Ventura County DA, and now the Attorney General. They don't return my calls, write me back. They ignore me. That's not justice.
Wow. Jack, tell me, is there a website you would recommend people to look at?
Well, I think you have to be careful when you're on the internet and anywhere you go. We're probably going to be feeding you some information here down the road that will tend to give you some direction as to where you can go. Each of us has our own way here tonight, and some of us will be giving you some websites or ideas of where to go. I know an old site that we used to be on, and we started a long time ago, was called Homeowners for Justice. C.J. Holmes started that. She was the founder of the California 18, and why we are here. We have 18 spreadsheets that we put together, and it's a large document that we had blown up. I have an assignment of my deed of trust, which is one of the 3 or 4 documents that everybody has on their land record, usually, predominantly, and it's the first step that the bank uses to falsify records. They record this on your property. They don't have the legal right most of the time to even do it. It's not their loan. They hide behind the crowd of judges who support them because they won't send them to jail.
Is that the document there?
This is an assignment, a deed of trust, and what this is the first document of many, including some promissory notes that are being forged. And the signature that you see scribbled there, that is supposed to be the legal signature on a legal document, and it's not. You'll see it's a scribbling. And the gentleman's name that's there, Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, has no knowledge of who he is. And yet he signed it as a representative of theirs.
Wow, is that a robo-signature?
It most certainly is. And it's still going on to this day.
Jack, tell us your credentials.
I'm a former police officer from Illinois and San Diego. Been a licensed detective, licensed in California, and part of the time I was licensed in Nevada as a private investigator. I'm a forensic specialist dealing with mortgage fraud and the representation of title fraud, and I work with many other people, including my peers here tonight. I've got about 6,000 investigations under my belt, and I've saved 20 people.
That's certainly worthy of an applause. That's certainly worthy of an applause. Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate you being here. Now we're going to turn to my next guest, Renee. Renee's on my side. Thank you, Renee, for being here.
Thank you, William. Thank you very much.
Tell us what you think people should know, Renee.
Well, what I think you should know is that if you're paying a mortgage or you think you're paying a mortgage, you might want to look into who you're actually paying. We can tell you unequivocally that we have none of us seen a legal document for anyone with a right to take your home or to collect money from you. We approached a year ago C.J. Holmes, our founder. We've got to give her a round. C.J.'s the reason we're here. C.J. Holmes amazingly brought together a show. We did a daily show for an hour in education. Through this show, we found that oaths and bonds were being violated. We found that we all came together with all our illegal documents with Recon Trust and Bank of America. And so what happened was, those were the two starting. Now I can tell you, everyone here, we represent every fraudster in the nation and the world. This doesn't just mean the United States, it goes international. We have every bank involved, not just, we have Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, we have Chase, JP Morgan. Thank you, Mr. Diamond, because you're still in Homes and you're still in your chair. We're out to get you. You're going to leave that chair unless you can get into a chair we really would like to see you in. We've got every servicer, Ocwen, Litton, Aurora. We have Recon Trust. We have Quality Loan Servicing, two of which in California are not paying any property or business taxes. We cannot find them paying business taxes any county in California.
Who is this, Renee?
Recon Trust, who is part of why we, the 18, are together.
And they're registered in California
And
to
they're
do
not
business.
paying any business taxes.
And they pay no taxes.
Zero. Oh, but Quality Loan Servicing does in Washington.
What?
Wow.
Yes. Now, we contacted Kamala Harris. C.J. Holmes sent 18 cases, and it was sent directly. We were told we were going to get some action. A year later, here we sit. What happened 2 months ago was we decided we'd had enough. Jed, down on the end here, Mr. Davis, and I, unknowingly at the same time, started reaching out to the AG. Now, mind you, for the last year, with this group alone, there are probably thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of emails to every agency, which, by the way, when you're a public representative, you have a duty under your oath to investigate fully, not just look at a piece of paper and say, oh, that doesn't look right. I mean fully, F-U-L-L-Y. And we have an F-bomb in our fraud closure world. It's called fraud. It is the biggest F-bomb this nation knows. This F-bomb has created identity theft, trespass on our likeness, which is creating the crime scenes within our records, in our land records, that is stealing our homes, our land, and our lives. Our families, in this group, I can tell you, no longer know who we are. When this plight started in our lives, we were gone. I have had one day in the last 6 months that I can even tell you I've shared with a child of mine, smiled, and tried to leave this plight behind. I myself found the tax assessor's office having stolen 1.63 acres from my property, When I went in to remind them, I had the documents showing for the second time I won my home back from illegal foreclosure. They were shocked that I found it. I was more shocked that they took it. In investigation and in proof, we found out that it was a perfect, what appeared to be an easement for utility down my property, with a big development going in a plot away. I kicked into gear because 2 weeks later I got a notice of default on my property. I am being stalked, I believe, and harassed systematically through every agency now that we can get it. We can all tell you, when you're in foreclosure, you have utility problems. You have mail problems because the post office is involved. You have problems with your access. I actually have a title policy that was paid. Equity Title sold me a policy for as an underwriter, Commonwealth Title. My land is landlocked. I have no legal easement in or out of my property. I have 27 acres. I don't have a legal right to get to or from. But they gave me a title policy. And each and every modification that they did that was illegal on my property, and I mean illegal because they wouldn't listen to me, they didn't put the names properly on it, so therefore it's void, V-O-I-D, fraud is void. There is no question. This is we shouldn't have to go to court to prove. It's void. So what happens with all of this is we send 18 cases to the Attorney General. Kamala Harris, darling, I am ready to have a cup of coffee with you and bring my crew. California 18 is calling you to the carpet. You have an oath which I have received without a notary on it. I have questioned why there's no notary on your oath. William, if there's no notary, do you think that means she's swearing under testimony that it's true?
If there's no notary, it's not a valid oath.
Well, that's my thought. So Kamala, let's clear this up, because we've talked to David Payman in LA. We've talked to Leslie Westmoreland, both very wonderful gentlemen, and I can tell you, I firmly believe that these two men had good mothers, because I think they raised good men. And I think these two men really are telling us the truth when they tell us they want to jail these banksters.
Well, that's been my solution for a long time, and people think maybe I'm a little radical, but I've been saying for a long time, the solution is to arrest all the banksters, starting with the Federal Reserve Board of Directors and all their subchapters and all their 7, 8, 9 branches of the Federal Reserve. You arrest them on the same day across the nation at the same time, and you lock them up until the gold that used to fill up Fort Knox is brought back, because it was stolen on 9/11, and there's virtually no corporate media coverage of what happened to all the gold that was at the gold depository. And where did it go? The bank gangsters got it, and they've stored it somewhere in a private vault, probably in upstate New York, and they're not going to give it back until they've crushed us completely, made us homeless on the land our founding fathers stole from the Indians. And I said that right. We stole it from the Indians.
Yes, amen.
And we need to put those bank gangsters in jail without bond, no getting out. The gold comes back from wherever you took it, because there was billions of gold bricks at the gold depository. They have never found but $280 million worth of it. Mm-hmm. 280 million. There was a little tiny one-paragraph story in the New York Times, and nobody else touched that story again. Where did the billions go? All of this is connected, and I think there's an agenda going on. I think the solution starts with, first of all, we have people from many counties here. Some from Norm Verroman's county, Mendocino County, yeah, all the way down here, a 10-hour drive. You'll hear him yet. Stay tuned. Norm Verroman was the good DA of Mendocino County who riled the Federals, got them really upset, and we're not going to go into that issue. But my point is, from every county, if you form your own militia, I mean armed men and women who are not only armed, but trained and ready to march to enforce the second thing that needs to be done. You need we the people, like that's behind me on this banner, we the people, grand juries, not appointed by any crooked judge in the county. And I have this on the authority of Justice Scalia of the U.S. Supreme Court. Says the grand juries do not belong to the judiciary, they don't belong to the executive, and they don't belong to the legislative. This is we the people's time when we see things are so bad, gone so far south. We the people spontaneously form our own grand juries. We impanel, we take an oath. we choose a foreman, we choose a secretary, and a recording officer. Then we call in the witnesses, and the witnesses come and testify under oath. It's all kept just like you do on these bogus grand juries that they use now. And then they issue what's called a true bill of indictment for the judge, for the congressman who took kickbacks and mutter into the table. I mean, Cunningham's in prison down from San Diego, and he was supposedly the golden boy who was going to save everything. He's doing time right now. I can tell you for a certain fact, more than half of all of the 435 congressmen have taken kickbacks. And you never see a congressman go into Congress worth only $200,000 net worth and come out only $200,000 net worth. Every one of those guys comes out worth multi-millions. And taking the hat off, that was just a reminder of things we've done in the past. I'm William Wagner here. Now we are actually live this Friday night. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Meine Damen und meine Herren, alles gut hier? Ja, alles klar. It's so interesting. I think every June, around June 1st to the June 13th, we the people that still care ought to send little short postcards to the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office, reminding them how corrupt they are. That they would, here's the address, Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office, and we got to remind them every June from the 1st to the 13th, hey guys, your Thompson Edison was completely corrupt, and so was Ron Zona and Gordy Auchincloss to bring falsified evidence with known grifters, liars, cheaters, and extortion artists to prosecute probably the only living saint this Santa Barbara County has had in the last 100 years, at least the only one I know of, being Michael Joe Jackson. That guy. He danced, he sang. He was a different kind of saint. He wasn't your ordinary, everyday, drab, dressed in rags saint on his knees, praying and begging for justice from God. He went out and restored joy in people's hearts. And he particularly liked it when we did good things for children. And he did a lot of good things, $350 million worth of good things. Donated, after paying tax on it, to the American criminal tax outfit known as the Internal Revenue Service, which really works for the Rothschild bank gangsters, which is the people that control the Federal Reserve. The whole system in America has been corrupted by the attorneys. The judges are in the pockets of the banks. And how they do that is, and even on the federal level, you think, oh, the federal judges, you can't remove them, they're there appointed for life. Well, guess what? About 25 years or so ago, Congress, in their great moment of omnibus stupidity bill, put a rider in, which probably no congressman really read. They're too busy going on junkets paid for by the corporations, getting freebies and getting laid by high-priced call girls and drunk so they can be blackmailed into voting the way the bank gangsters want them to. They had this rider, and it basically said every time Congress gets an increase in salary, all the federal judges get an automatic increase in salary. And they did this, Congress did this really sly. They said, oh, well, we don't raise our salaries. We appoint a committee and we let them decide if our salaries could go up. And of course, everybody Congress puts on that committee is a friend of some powerful congressman. You can bet on that. So regularly, the committee raises congressional salaries and automatically the federal judges' salaries go up too. What a nice scam. Just like they said in the federal, if you have the same hands group in control of all three branches of government, you will have absolute tyranny, and that's what we have. A man named Ted Visner, who lives in Michigan, just got the notice of possession that was granted to the bank gangsters to take his property away by Judge Jane. Judge Eric Jane in Michigan, I wish you would, sir, would come and do an interview with me here live on television and tell us all the stocks and bonds you have invested in banks, in which particular banks. I'm not saying you're a crooked judge, just that inquiring minds want to know. So with my hat off for you people, I rarely take it off for anybody in government. They're just not worthy. And today, finally, I get a notice from the United States District Court of Appeals that they're going to affirm the denial of my media request appeal for this crooked court up in this crooked female judge up in Spokane, if we don't promptly pay the filing fees, which it's really interesting. This is dated July 10th, okay? Today's July 17th, but the case is already concluded. The judge appointed somebody with a conflict of interest to defend young Mr. Smith, who was selling a product that helps people get well, and all that's left now is to sentence him to 40 years in prison for helping people get well. And there were thousands of people that donated for his defense. Mr. Smith's mistake, in my view, was not getting me up there to Spokane to do my own investigation prior to the court going forward. And I kept informing Mr. Smith, you need to get me up there. You need to make people available for me to interview. We need to get your story publicly long before you think you're going to get a delay in the trial, because they've kangarooed the trial. You know, they hop over justice and make sure the defendant cannot win. That's what a kangaroo trial is, where the outcome is predetermined by the denial of motions and the refusal to let real evidence in prior to. I'm not saying the judge up there, what's her name, in Eastern District of Spokane, Federal 9th District, that she is totally corrupt. I just can't see anything that she's done that is not corrupt. Doesn't mean she didn't do any other cases that weren't corrupt. I just haven't seen any. And I've seen corrupt judges in Kern County. Judge Corey Woodward should have been remanded and removed. Didn't happen. Didn't get removed anyway. Orange County Judge Scott Steiner, sex with former law students, should have been removed. Didn't happen. The system is corrupt. And Ted Visner up there in Michigan, he's got a battle on his hand. I just wonder what I should do, if I should frame this notice from the federal judge. Now that it's too late, it doesn't matter, it's a moot issue, because the whole point of my motion to the 9th District was this young man, Smith, is embattled, and he's got no attorney that will fight for him like Tom Mesereau or Michael Minns out of Houston, Texas. He doesn't have a real attorney. He's got one of these appointed pretend defenders. And that pretend defender even told the judge, I need time to prepare. The judge said, you're not going to get it. We're going to hammer this guy. Boom, we're going to put it through the system. And they did just exactly that. And I just wonder if we had the right representation that Michael Warnken talked to us about a long time ago, if we had the right representation, we could get judges impeached and removed. But we do not have the 30,000 human beings to one rep, which is the correct ratio according to the United States Constitution, which pretty much nobody reads and nobody understands anymore. They're not paying any attention to it. And all this started to fall apart many, many years ago when the original 13th Amendment was ignored. The one passed in started in 1812 and I think ratified by 1818. the one that takes away attorneys' special privileges and sets them as above the rest of us, special kind of citizen. And we've seen over and over, like right here in Santa Maria, Alan W. Courtney, was sentenced to many, many months in state prison, convicted of, I forget, 6, 7 felonies out of 17 he was charged with on the second trial, with a prosecutor from the corrupt Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office that did his absolute level best to lose the prosecution of a fellow member of the bar. But Rex Phillips hung in there and pushed, and Alan Courtney lost his license, went to prison. Now he wants his license back. And I remember him in that courtroom of Judge Garcia saying, I can't make any restitution if you lock me up, and the jails are already full. I shouldn't go to jail, basically, was what he's saying. I'm a lawyer. I'm a member of the bar. Or at least he was until he was convicted, and then they disbarred him. And it was interesting, the local CBS channel, the corporate channel, not this channel. You're watching what is technically called community access television, or under the federal description, it's called public access, or PAG. But the corporate channel, asked me to move over in that courtroom so they could get the prime spot to tape this thing. I moved over, gave them room. They were late getting there. I was already set up, but I was courteous. I moved over. They didn't publish 1 minute, not 1 minute. And you can go on YouTube and see lawyer shot down in court, number 3, and you can see the whole sentencing. Yours truly, right here. I put it up on YouTube so everybody could see it, whether you're watching this channel on Comcast Cable local or not. CBS Corporate didn't publish even 1 minute of it. So why did they need me to move over so they could have the prime? Whatever. It just shows you can't trust corporate media television to tell you anything that's truthful unless it makes them look good, unless it promotes, their agenda. And the agenda right now going on is to destroy America. I mean, they're really trying to destroy this country. When I say they, I specifically mean the bank gangsters. I specifically mean the international Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPonts, these guys. They are specifically trying to destroy America. Well, I had hoped that we would hear from Ted Visner by now, and I think he's finally called in.
Just a moment.
Do you have him?
Yes, he's here.
All right, let me put him on because I don't think we have a Skype set up for him. Okay, should I put him on speaker?
Yes.
Okay, hello.
Hello, Mr. Wagner. Ted Visner here.
Okay, can we hear Ted okay there on the audio?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we got good audio. You're in Michigan, right, Ted?
Yes, Bill, we're in Michigan here.
You're in the same state where there's some so-called militia started up a couple of years ago, and the feds went after them and said they were. Do you remember those guys?
Tari? Yes.
Was that all a fake militia? Was that all a set up, a ruse to scare people about the militia?
Well, I think, having talked to a lot of people that were familiar with the Tari group, yeah, I think it was a federal move to discredit the state's effort here to create a suitable militia to prevent the tyranny that we're seeing today.
And in your case, you were foreclosed on, and Judge Eric Jane gave an order of possession to what group of bank gangsters to take your property?
It was actually MERS and Bank of America through Trot and Trot, the law firm.
Trot and Trot. Their office is in where? Dearborn, Michigan, or Detroit, or?
Yeah, I think it's Dearborn or Detroit.
So what was the issue? Tell me how this came to be, and tell me first, are you still on your property, or did they physically drag you off your property?
No, we're still on the property right now, and last Friday we went to court. I was actually noticed to come to court. I went to court, and Judge James claimed that I didn't have standing to defend myself. I was brought to court. I answered to the complaint, and the judge basically struck everything I had to say by claiming that I didn't have standing, which is deprivation of due process.
Yeah, it would seem to me to be a severe deprivation of due process if they noticed you to come to court, correct?
Correct.
And you did come to court, correct?
And I did come to court. That's correct.
At the correct time and the correct day.
That is right.
And
It was
then
Friday, last Friday, July 10th.
and then the judge.
In fact, they sent a sheriff's car out here and escorted me 25 minutes into town. I was followed the entire way.
So they wanted to make sure you would show up in court, and then what happened?
And then I read my piece into the record, and Judge Eric James, newly appointed to Isabella County Trial Court by, I believe, the Governor Rick Snyder, told me that I didn't have standing, and basically gave an order of possession to the bank.
Well, why would they send a notice to bring you to court and send a sheriff's car, I assume it was a black and white, out to escort you if they just wanted to tell you didn't have standing?
Yeah, they could have done that by first-class mail, I guess. I'm not sure, Mr. Wagner. I can't comprehend what these county units of government are doing today. It just doesn't even make sense.
So, do you have a We the People grand jury form there of 25 tried and true citizens?
Well, we certainly do, and we're coordinating efforts right now. There's folks supposed to be coming to rally here that are familiar with the People's Grand Jury and how we're going to address what's going on here. We've already had the fake militia out here through the Michigan 3%er group here that wanted to see our loan documents to find the constitutional violations we were talking about. And when they showed up, we didn't have the court transcripts that we have now because they were here on Sunday, and the transcripts were from the previous Friday's hearing. So with that information, they claim to the alleged patriot groups here in Michigan and all over the country, I guess, that we're refusing to give them documentation, which was completely untrue. So it just helped confuse the situation for a lot of folks, and I'm so glad you've taken the opportunity here to reach out and let me tell those stories. So hopefully we can get back on track with hopefully rectifying what's wrong with county and state governments here in Michigan.
So you have fake militia operating in Michigan, and you have, hopefully, a real militia that'll show up like they did for Cleveland Bundy's ranch in Bunkerville, Nevada, and drove the BLM away at gunpoint.
Well, we're hoping for that, Bill. I don't want this to turn into a bloody revolution. I do, however, need for the world at large, and especially the community that I live in the state of Michigan, to stand up and take notice that people are tired of being pushed around. The Michigan Appellate Court ruled in 2011 that that MERS, Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, Inc., does not have standing to foreclose on Michigan homeowners. And the banks didn't like that, of course, Bill, so they appealed it to the Michigan Supreme Court.
I'm sure they appealed it. Yeah, and how did the appeal go down?
The Michigan Supreme Court denied the banks leave to appeal. They denied their leave to appeal, but at the same time overturned the Michigan Appellate Court decision that stated that Mears did not have standing to foreclose here in Michigan, and committed misprision of felony and the obstruction of justice. And these are crimes by our state's highest court, the Michigan Supreme Court.
I comprehend what you just said. I think I agree with you. If what you just said is exactly true, the way you said it, and I haven't read your documents, I haven't read the court proceedings, I just barely heard about your case a couple weeks ago and then was reminded, I think, late last night. We're live on local Comcast television here, Ted. Just so
Live.
yeah, this is live. We're going out, and I'm sure there's some district attorneys here scratching their head trying to figure out how they can cut the show off the air, but we're live right now. But it's not unusual. We had two completely corrupt district attorneys in a row. One named Tom Sneddon, who, praise God, finally died and stopped polluting the air with his breath last November 1st. And then we had the one that succeeded him, Christine Stanley. She died even before her predecessor did. And I told her before she was elected, you won't live to finish your first term. And even though the words came out of my mouth, I didn't know who said that. That was an interesting. I just got done videoing her at the Santa Barbara, what was it called? The Santa Barbara Women's Law Association, something like that. And I think there was 20 of them. They filled up this little room, and she made the speech why she should be elected to succeed Tom Sneddon, who had humiliated himself in front of the world by prosecuting a saint, I call Saint Michael Jackson, with totally bogus felonies and fabricated evidence that was exposed as fabricated evidence right in front of the jury. So of course the jury had no alternative but to find the defendant, Saint Michael Jackson, completely innocent. So this gal, Christy Stanley, followed him. The word was put out, don't anybody run against her. She's my hand-picked successor. Well, she was the hand-picked successor because they had a very cozy he-she sort of relationship. And then she had to marry a guy named Stanley to kind of cover things up. She was on I think he was her third or fourth husband. One or two of her husbands died. But anyway, long story short, she's making this beautiful speech, which I dutifully videotaped it all. And then she walked right by me in front of my face just as I was shutting my camera off. And I asked her, are you going to indict Tom Sneddon for his felonies he committed while district attorney? And she kind of went, pff, sort of puff and blew me off. And this voice jumped out of my throat and said, you won't live to finish your first term. And she didn't. She was dead in the 4th year from cancer. And when I said that, nobody knew she had cancer. She didn't know she had cancer. She probably didn't have cancer. But about a year and a half later, after I said that, she had won the election, she did come down with cancer, and she died. And she decided she was not going to go leave her job. She was tough and strong, and she was just going to be more powerful than the cancer. And I don't know if it was God or the cancer taught her otherwise. And she didn't finish. So, I mean, I've seen justice, but it doesn't come in the courtroom. It comes through... It comes through the militia, like showed up at Bundy's Ranch. And I can tell you, I know you don't want to start a revolution, and you can't, because the revolution, Ted, has already started. It started,
Yes, sir, I believe you.
It started April 10th to the 12th last year near the I-15 overpass over a place that borders Cleveland Bundy's ranch. And I didn't even know it was happening, and I tried to keep up on things, but, you had, I don't even think Cleveland knows how many people, there not only was the 200 BLM guys in SWAT team armor, there was about 200 militias showed up, not all at the same time, but eventually they numbered about 200. And I'm told by Cleveland's right-hand guy there that at some point after they had confiscated his cattle, taken his cattle, and I asked Cleveland, why did you let him take the cattle? He says, well, you got to let them commit the crime before you can call them criminals. So he allowed the BLM to commit the crime of cattle rustling, which used to be a hanging offense in Nevada and Utah and other western states.
Sure.
He let him do it, and then the militia showed up. The Clark County sheriff showed up and said, oh, why don't you just let the BLM have their way? And Cleveland said, why don't you arrest them? Your job as county sheriff is to defend we, the people of this county, not these federal agents. And Cleveland, I think, was 100% spot on correct. I just sorry I wasn't there to tape it with my own camera because Fox was out there. And I told Cleveland's wife, I think it was the evening of the 12th, don't count on Fox. They'll give you a one-day splash and then they'll just shut up and disappear. And mainly they're spies for the government. They're spies for the bank gangsters. And that's, she found out I was exactly correct, but they were hoping Fox News would, really be a real news outfit, and they weren't. But yeah, the revolution already started. That is the first time in my memory that the people showed up and really pushed back. And I interviewed a guy named Ed Brown and his wife, Dr. Elaine Brown, who's a dentist, or was a dentist, at their home in New Hampshire, about a week or 10 days before the feds arrested them, because they gave them a kangaroo court trial, and they could see it was a kangaroo. And so Ed said, well, they're not going to let my witness speak. They're not going to let me get my piece in, so I'm just not going to go back to the kangaroo federal trial. And it was about paying income tax. And I remember in my interview with Ed Brown, which is on YouTube, he said something about constitutional rangers are needed, and he was one of them. Only the militia didn't show up. He didn't ask for the militia to show up. And he's now rotting in jail, just like our other guy who wrote The Federal Mafia, Erwin Schiff, who I interviewed 3 times in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's rotting in jail in his 80s for doing nothing more than writing a book and teaching people how to legally get all of their income tax money back. And that, I thought we had First Amendment freedom of press, Ted.
We do, and the criminals were asking to support our rights are the ones taking them away, and it's got to stop. It has to stop now.
Yeah, it has to
This
stop.
is not the country I'm leaving to my children.
Well, yeah, but I'm afraid they're going to force it to bloodshed. And I think that the Jade Helm is partially to get the military used to bullying Americans on American soil, which is totally illegal and against the federal code. Totally illegal, unlawful too. Violates the Constitution, violates the federal U.S. code. You can't use American troops against Americans in America. That's what police and sheriffs are supposed to, figure that out.
That's right. I think the difference here between what's going on in Blanchard, Michigan versus Cliven Bundy's issue, I'm dealing with local unconstitutionality in the sheriff's department, unconstitutionality in our local county courts. And Cliven's issue was with the BLM on his land, or the land that the federal land he was using, and it was more of a federal issue on state soil, which you're right, the sheriff's department should have been a major part in quelling that immediately and not letting it get to where it got to. But right here in Michigan, we're actually being the same actions against us basically, but it's not federal actors, it's state actors. And there's a huge push right now to restore constitutionality in our counties across the country, and the National Liberty Alliance is making huge strides in that area. I completely support the National Liberty Alliance and what they're trying to do, because they're putting the law down on the table and they're insisting on it, and that's exactly what needs to be done. And that's what I'm doing right here in the middle of Michigan.
Well, I hope you succeed. In Cliven's defense, I should mention that his whole issue started out about saving a desert tortoise, and they was making a false claim, the federal government was making a false claim that his cows were killing the tortoises. Where atom bombs exploded out there near his ranch didn't kill the tortoises off. They were testing A-bombs out there in the 50s and the 60s until they finally stopped by global consent. That didn't kill the tortoises, but he was claiming that his cattle that had been out there for 100 and some years was somehow damaging the tortoises. When it all got said and done, and we did our research, we found out it had nothing to do with tortoises. And he fought the feds over this tortoise issue for 20 years. And one of the misinformations that you probably heard, as many Americans did, is, oh, Cleveland isn't paying his grazing fees. But the fact and the truth is, his grandfather or his wife's great-grandfather had filed for the grazing rights almost as soon as the state of Nevada was created. They were already there. And the grazing rights, they don't have to pay any fees for. They're grandfathered in. They never have to. But just to cover all the bases, he offered a check to Clark County, and Clark County would never cash the check. So he wasn't violating any law, and Fox News, I think, misrepresented that. All the major newspapers nationwide misrepresented that this guy wouldn't pay his grazing taxes. And the truth is, he didn't owe any grazing taxes. He made the infrastructure improvements. Not one state or federal government agency ever lifted a finger to improve that BLM, which is actually public land, not BLM land. BLM just was allowed to manage it. And I need to stress that Cleveland and his ancestors were farming and ranching that land before, long before, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, was even created. And they somehow think just because they move in like squatters and say, well, we're going to manage it, and you got to stay on this side of the fence or that side of the stream, that they somehow own it. And it's always been public land, not federal public land, not even state public land. It belongs to we the people. But he's got grazing rights. The rest of us got rights to walk on the land too, as long as we don't interfere with his grazing rights. It's public land. In your case, you've got crooked bank gangsters and MERS, which I'm glad you spelled it out, Mortgage Electronic Registration System. Yeah.
Right.
I just noticed that's on my documents, and I never knew it was on my documents. And it turns out in many states, they weren't even registered to act as a corporation or function as a business. They weren't even registered. And they're just doing business as if they were, as if the laws only apply to other people, but not to MERS. So you should win, but I don't think you'll win unless the militia shows up, Ted, because Cliven did everything right for 20 years, and they still wouldn't let him stay on his land and graze. And he owned 160, I think, acres free and clear. This is the grazing land around his 160 acres. And they did, according to what he told me back in February, about $200,000 plus worth of damage, for which nobody has compensated the Bundy Ranch. Nobody. And I said to him, you need a grand jury. You need a We the People grand jury. And Cliven spoke up at a conference we had at a hotel, which is already on YouTube. And he said, I don't know much about the grand jury, but I do know when the militia showed up, the crap stopped. So his faith is in the militia, and he just skipped the whole grand jury thing because he doesn't understand how the grand jury works. He's a cowboy. He's been right in the range all these years, and his children and grandchildren too. I hope the militia, the right militia, the correct We the People militia, that is not a paid shill of the federal CIA or NSA or the bank gangsters. I hope the real militia show up for you, Ted.
Well, thanks, Bill. I do too, for sure.
Now, what were you going to say before I interrupted you? Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to point out the fact that Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Incorporated is a straw company created by the nation's largest banks to avoid paying county registration fees. A lot of people don't really understand this, but every time a property changes mortgagee or there's a new servicing agreement, the county register of deeds gets paid $30, $35 per transaction every time a property, because it has to be re-recorded.
Right.
You know, those transfers have to be recorded so that the people in the community can figure out who owns these properties. And with the creation of MERS, it's been estimated that MERS has stolen over $200 billion from the counties across this country, creating pitfalls and shortfalls in a lot of them by robbing this registration fee from counties across America. And that's placed the counties in significant harm's way just through the deprivation of those, counted on income.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Ladies and gentlemen, meine Herren and meine Damen, wir sind hier in Santa Maria. We're here in Santa Maria, ladies and gentlemen, and I haven't spoken with this man who's in the state of Michigan prior to this phone call. This is our first contact, thanks to Ed Vallejo, a third party in Los Angeles. Well, I hope the call goes out for the militia to help you, but I think, it's sad to say, but I think until the militia starts arresting these judges, and I think going back in time to the man I interviewed 10 years ago, was sitting in a federal prison. I think he's up in Michigan right now, or Indiana. This guy who wrote The Federal Mafia. He wrote a book. There's no pornography in it. He doesn't call for violent revolution. And he's sitting in a federal prison, basically for writing a book and teaching people how to legally and lawfully get their income tax back and to voluntarily only report what you voluntarily want to subject yourself to their illegal jurisdiction. And he points out, and then, you know, you've got my other friend from Beverly Hills who discovered a great actress. He did a film called From Freedom to Fascism. He points out, and he interviewed an IRS commissioner who stated flat out it's a voluntary tax. Okay, if it's voluntary, why are you hassling people that volunteer not to pay it? Or volunteer, you know, our whole government is run by crooked bankers, and all goes back to the City National Bank and the Rothschild-controlled central banks, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And Ron Paul did a great job in exposing them when he was chairman of a subcommittee on finance. Did you see that? Did you see that, Ted?
No, I haven't seen that one. Nope.
It's on my YouTube, and Ron Paul really nailed their butt. He subpoenaed them, and they had to admit they were not delivering all the subpoenaed documents. Their attorney showed up in D.C. and admitted to Ron Paul, yeah, we are not bringing all the documents. But they did admit they were only making loans to foreign corporations in other countries, and that's what triggered the real estate collapse in '07. Ron Paul did a great job, and the media and the banks did all they could to destroy Ron Paul's candidacy for president, even though he raised the most money anybody had ever raised without a single corporate donation in a single 24-hour period. I figured it was $7 or $8 million, all raised by little people like you and me, we the people, not big corporate donations. He didn't take any corporate donations. He raised millions in a 24-hour period, broke all records for somebody who didn't even have a nomination yet. He never got the nomination. That was the point. They didn't want him as president because if Ron Paul was president, you wouldn't be having this problem. The banks...
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
That's exactly right.
I've been a big Ron Paul supporter since he announced his candidacy for president.
Yeah,
I followed him in the media, and I was just shocked and appalled that media were cutting him out. I mean, they even almost completely hid the fact that he was a candidate.
Yeah, and often they would ridicule Ron Paul, like, are you even really a Republican? Because you're talking so different than all the other Republicans. I was talking to a Democrat today, a dear friend of mine, and I informed him. He was trying to tell me Obama's better than Bush, and I said they're the same thing. They just paint them a different color. Take a pile of crap, paint it white or paint it red or blue. It's still, when you scratch beneath the paint, it's the same manure. It's the same thing, and he just kept thinking it makes a difference. And I finally had to tell him, you know what? It's your failure to see that there is no difference is why they continue to trick people with fake elections. They've already picked who the next president's going to be. So to me, I unregistered to vote in I think it was 2011 or 2012, when I saw that Ron Paul was railroaded by the media, railroaded. I mean, they were outright lying, saying Romney won. When Ron Paul had won the most delegates, they'd say Romney won this state. And I'm like, wait a minute. Your stuff you're showing on the screen shows you're wrong. And I guess Ron...
It goes to show you how powerful our media has become, and that's become a large part of the problem.
It is.
I ran for sheriff in 2012 in my county, and I was going to clean house. And I actually ran on the Democratic ticket. And I claimed to be a JFK-era Democrat. And the Democratic Party here in Isabella County nominated the Republican two-term incumbent that was going to go to jail if I won. The Mount Pleasant Morning Sun newspaper announced this Leo Metashevsky had beaten me in the election, and I I demanded to see proof that he actually won, and they quit talking to me. They wouldn't show me any proof. So I'm not convinced that I didn't actually legitimately win the election in Isabella County for sheriff. But things are so screwed up here right now that any change in command would be fatal to a lot of people's freedoms right here in my county.
Well, a lot of those
I know.
people probably belong in jail.
I know.
There's a lot of people. I mean, I don't know. Do you have these vote scanning machines in your county?
I'm not sure I know what you mean there.
There's these machines that automatically count the votes. It's not hand counted by real people anymore.
I think it is. I think they are scanned in and tallied electronically.
Well, you should check out my YouTube clip, Ted, when you get a chance. A guy named Clint Curtis. I went to Florida to interview him because I was too distracted to know that he was actually running for Congress in Northern California, and I could have got him on tape there. But he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that, and admitted, which blew my mind, he admitted he wrote the software that steals the votes while he was working for a Chinese corporation that had a contract with NASA at Orlando. I think it was called the Chang Corporation. And their contract with NASA had nothing to do with writing software to steal votes. But he told me, and it's on film, and he told a congressional committee that he wrote the software that would make sure the votes always showed up about 49% to 50% and a fraction. So it always looked like it was a real close election. Gee, guys, try a little harder next time, but it didn't matter. The votes can be scanned. And when I interviewed him in a hotel near Orlando, I was just shocked at what he admitted. And then he also said, ever since he wrote that, he noticed a 1,000 or something like that, 1,000% increase in close elections where the bad guys win all across America, where the votes were coming out 49 point something to 50 point something, exactly the way he wrote the software.
Wow.
And so our votes don't matter. That's why I unregistered to vote. And what county are you in there in Mount Pleasant? What county is that in Michigan?
It's Isabella County.
Isabella County. I'm in Santa Barbara County. And they use these machines. And when I went down to check on them with my cameraman, they got their panties in a bundle. They couldn't believe anybody would dare come down and look at what the election code says is supposed to be an open process. It's not supposed to be secret. But they didn't want my cameras, and what I caught on camera was devastating to this county. And after that, and then what they did to Ron Paul, I just unregistered to vote. And it's interesting, the decline to state voters in my county are continually increasing in percentage of the voters. And more than that, the number of people that simply don't vote anymore. Either they're registered and they don't vote, which is a mistake because they will vote for you. And we've caught that happening here, where people didn't vote. They were
Even if you're dead.
Yeah, even if you're dead, they will vote for you. So I went and unregistered to vote after years of telling people to get out to vote, but that was before we had these vote scanning machines. Once the vote scanning machines came in and they implemented those, we saw a lot of really bad results in elections here. And it's interesting also because Italy tried these machines decades ago, and then they threw them out because they realized if the vote could be stolen through electronic tampering, it would happen and did happen. So Italy's already tried this failed technology and thrown them out and gone back to hand-counted votes. America is self-destructing because the people are ignorant and they don't know what's happening and they don't say anything about it. And people that do
That's right.
often get arrested. And I don't say that lightly because I was running in 2002, I think it was 2002, for county supervisor. And suddenly I was arrested on a warrant they never showed me. They said it's electronic. We'll get it to you after you get to the jail. Got to the jail, still no warrant. Locked up in jail, still no warrant. Got out of jail, still no warrant. And there were 5 other
You
people.
didn't sign anything.
No, I never signed anything. I didn't agree to anything. And then the particular guy, I forget his name, but the jailer, I had $100 in my pocket, and he tried to write it down as $20 when they took, my stuff out of my wallet. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Sign this, sign this." I said, "I won't sign it. That's $100, not $20. And I filed a complaint against that police officer, but he didn't get fired. Anyway, in my case, they just wanted me to lose the county supervisor because I was out to get some people indicted and hung, and they knew it. And so they had to make sure that a former disgraced chief of police who was forced to resign because of a scandal they had to cover up, he won the election and I lost. But I was winning up until the point they arrested me 3 days before the election. And we're seeing this all across the country. The good people are being slandered and destroyed, and the criminals are taking office. And that's why I think eventually this revolution is going to boil over, and that's what Jade Helm 15 is all about. Scaring the hell out of people, trying to get the military of America to go along with bullying civilians, which is absolutely unlawful, absolutely contrary to the U.S. federal code and the Constitution. And that's one of the reasons it says, I think it's in Article 1, they shall not have a standing army for more than 2 years. It has to be funded every 2 years. They didn't ever expect there would be a day when we would have a standing Air Force, standing Navy, standing Army, and I can understand having a standing Navy because you can't create a Navy overnight. You can't create an Air Force overnight. But an Army you can create overnight. And so we should not have a standing Army in the United States. Anyway, I'm talking, and I really wanted to hear you talk. So you ran for sheriff. What was the percentage you lost? What was the percentage they said you lost by?
I think the spread was 8%.
Well, that's
So
pretty.
with another 4.2% of the vote or so, I would have been sheriff. Taking into consideration that their numbers are real and weren't manufactured to begin with.
Well, they probably were manufactured, and there's a guy named Huey Long and a guy named Lyndon Baines Johnson. Were both famous for stealing elections. Famous for it. In fact, I have in front of me today, as we're talking here in the studio live, on a book. I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's called LBJ, the Mastermind of the JFK Assassination. And I mentioned that because you said you were a JFK Democrat. Well, he was going to end the Vietnam War as soon as he got reelected. The bankers didn't want that war to end because they make a lot of money on war.
Right.
So they had to get LBJ to come on board to help cover up the assassination. Oswald had nothing to do with this. Have you read this book, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Have you read this book by Philip Nelson? LBJ, the Mastermind of the JFK Assassination?
Yes, I think that one's in my library.
Yeah, I not only read it twice, I took notes all through it. LBJ had direct contact with the mafia. The mafia was working with the CIA. LBJ. The only thing I disagree with the title, and I interviewed Mr. Nelson in Santa Barbara when he came out here for a conference, I think it was 2 years ago. This book came out in 2013. And there's another book mentioned and referenced in this book, which is as good or better than this one. But I mean, he points out that Lyndon Baines Johnson had his own personal assassin who would assassinate people so he could climb. He points out, which I never heard about. I heard rumors, but I never saw it documented. LBJ stole the 1948 U.S. Senate race from Texas. And the guy that was cheated sued him. But the suit was quashed because LBJ had brownie points with the criminals in the judicial system. And a guy named Clark, who became ambassador to Australia, was the paymaster for all the assassins. He was a member, honorable member, Edward Clark, honorable member of the Texas Bar Association. And everywhere I look, there's a member of the Bar Association involved in corrupting this country. Edward Clark, not the Libertarian presidential candidate of 1980, Edward Clark. This was an Edward Clark from the 1960s and 70s. Totally different person. But he had law firms, I think, in Austin, Houston, and Dallas. And he would move the money where it needed to be moved so people would get paid for assassinating whoever LBJ wanted assassinated. And his personal assassin was a guy named Mac Wallace. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do.
I was astonished when I saw that Mac Wallace was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years probation and walked out of the courtroom right after being sentenced for first-degree murder. With 5 witnesses testified that he was the guy that did the murder. And he walked out, went on with his life. I think it's the only case I know of where someone's convicted of first-degree murder and the judge lets them walk out on probation. And that was back in the 50s. I think it was the 50s, yeah. This is a good book. I disagree with the title. The title should be LBJ, the Mastermind of the Cover-Up of the Assassination. Because I really believe the bankers, including Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, all these guys were in collusion. They had so much money to make from the Vietnam War, which 5 of my cousins died in, my best friend died in, right in front of my eyes. They couldn't let John Fitzgerald Kennedy get reelected and terminate that war. But LBJ had no problem running the war for as long as it could. He couldn't care less how many of us died. So what are you going to run for sheriff again? Did you demand a recount, by the way, on your election? A hand count?
I did demand a recount, and they completely ignored me.
They ignored?
They completely ignored the request. Plausible deniability seems to be one of their most effective countermeasures. The Michigan Attorney General has been cornered and told about what's going on here, and every time he's cornered, he acts like, he did a brain dump between the last time he was informed of the crimes taking place here in my county. And it's just incredible. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, should I call you Bill or William?
William's fine. We only got about 10 minutes left, so
okay.
Tell me what you need to say.
I wanted to tell you, William, that this is the first time we've talked, and I have watched a lot of your YouTube videos, and I'm particularly impressed with your advocacy for victims of CPS. And the coverage you did on the Nancy Schaefer incident, where she is alleged to have been involved in a murder-suicide when it was clearly something other than that.
Yeah, it was clearly a double murder. Bear would never have shot his wife, Nancy, in the back. And I haven't finished with that report. You noticed only the last video is not yet been published because I'm hoping in the state of Georgia we'll get a change of attorney generals. We'll get somebody who's decent and honest. And then one thing I learned in the business of investigative reporting, it's fine to come out and tell the truth, but there better be somebody you can tell it to who will do something about it. And if there isn't, all you're doing is shooting yourself in the back of the head. And a lot of reporters have died coming out telling too much truth when the people they're telling to are in cahoots with the very people that need to be in prison. So yeah,
Exactly right.
I haven't finished, but I'm waiting to see if we the people, grand juries, will form. Because when they do, if they do in Georgia, I got enough to put Sonny in prison and a couple of those state senators in prison, and a lot of people in Michigan, or not Michigan, Georgia, are going to be facing criminal charges, and it'll be ugly time. It'll be really ugly time. But go ahead,
Well,
I cut you off.
I wanted to add to that by saying I found the complicity of the Michigan Supreme Court in the child trafficking that's happening right here by CPS in Michigan, and it's all contained in a single Michigan court rule, 3.920H, as in hotel. This court rule is specifically written to deprive respondent parents in Michigan of their due process rights by stating that when they come to court and they appear, they're waiving the right to due process and proper notice, trapping them in a jurisdiction that was unlawfully created and is being criminally maintained. The prosecutors here in the Michigan counties are relying on Michigan Court Rule 3.920H to call up a parent of children that have just been abducted and telling them they have to be in court in 10 minutes. And once they show up, they're all freaked out. They're not thinking about anything legal. They're trying to get their kids back. They want to know what's going on. They don't understand, and their physical appearance at these court hearings is trapping them in the jurisdiction. And this court rule was created by the Michigan Supreme Court.
Wow.
So in my state, the Michigan Supreme Court is complicit in the willful deprivation of due process rights of CPS victims.
Wow. I agree, and there was a case up there I covered in Michigan, and it's on YouTube too. I can't think of the name of the guy, but I have like 4 or 5 parts interview. He's up near Bay City, Michigan. Maybe you know who I'm talking about. I can't think of his name right now because I've done hundreds of these CPS cases, and I must have at least 100 of them published. Another 200 or 300 I just never got finished editing and got them up there. But this guy in Bay City, he was forced to pay for a child even after he proved it was not his child by DNA evidence. They said you're going to have to pay anyway. Even when the Supreme Court said you don't, CPS went after him anyway. And it's just bizarre and crazy. They're out of control. And I think one of the things the militia should be called in to do is just start wholesale going to CPS offices, just marching in with their guns and arresting everybody. Just say, you're indicted, we're taking you into custody, you people are not going to go home tonight. You're going to go sit in our prison. And you're going to have to prove you didn't do these crimes before you get out, because there's not going to be any bond sent, no bail for you. I think we have to go there, or we will become a total slave state in each and every of the 50 states, with the exception of maybe North Dakota and maybe Montana. But all the rest of the states, we're going to just become communistic states, and this is Agenda 21. And if you haven't looked up Agenda 21, just Google it, just search it. This is communism being installed against our will to destroy our freedoms, and they're doing it. And once there was I wish we had another hour to go, but we've been on for almost 45 minutes. And I prepped people before you called in. I mentioned this criminal judge they got on the bench there in Michigan. What's his name? Eric Jane. But there is a case up in New Hampshire. I called the attorney, and she wouldn't call me back, which said a lot, because her client was facing murder charges. They had a CPS officer go to his house and announce to him, next week, have your daughter's suitcase packed, we're taking her, and we're going to put her in a foster home. You're not worthy to be a parent of your own child, and we're taking her, so have her ready next week. And the guy said to her, if you come back, I will shoot you right in the doorway. And the idiot came back with a cop backing him up, and he shot him dead anyway, right in front of the cop. And you know who told me about this? Ed Brown. When I was doing an interview with him, I think we just turned off the camera, and then he started talking about CPS, and Ed Brown's sitting in prison. And the problem is we've got Ed Brown in prison. He should be sitting in a judgeship. Ed Brown, I think, would make a better federal judge than 90% of what we've got sitting in the federal benches. Erwin Schiff, who's sitting in prison in his 80s, ought to be put as a tax judge, a federal tax judge, because then you could be assured, no matter what the government said, you, the people, are going to win. It's sad that the innocent and the good people are being criminalized, their children taken, their property taken. And if any of you are listening out there and you're part of the militia, you need to get a hold of Ted up in Isabel County. And keep in mind, he did run for sheriff. And they probably did cheat on the election. They only have to cheat in a few significant precincts to throw the whole thing. And I caught them doing that here in Santa Maria. They put in fluoride in our water, and I caught them, and I demanded a recount. And in my case, they said, fine, we'll recount, Mr. Wagner. You just put up $8,000 a day in certified funds each day, and we'll count the whole county. And I said, I don't want the whole county. I just want these 5 or 6 precincts in Santa Maria counted. No, they want to count the whole county. And that's how crooked it is. So it's not just your county, Isabella County, Michigan, Ted. It's all over the country. And I talked to a guy named Grabsky, who's down in Florida. They burned down the city hall to prevent him from getting documents, public documents. They destroyed the documents, burned the city hall to the ground. The city did. And
That sounds familiar.
yeah,
Didn't something similar happen to Building 7 at the World Trade Center?
absolutely. Building 7 was destroyed for multiple reasons. And that's why the corporate media will never talk about the Solomon Building, otherwise known as 7 World Trade Center, because it fell to the ground about 6 hours after the Twin Towers, and they never mention it every September. For over a decade, I've never seen a single channel mention it on national news. And the reason is no plane hit it. The plane that was supposed to hit it crashed somewhere else. So they had a problem. I'm glad you called in, Ted. You got something else you want to tell us?
No, that was just it. I would like to talk to you again for sure. The Danielle Austin CPS case here in Isabella County, Michigan, I just wanted to add that her 3 children were abducted by these criminals here in this county on a petition to remove her children that was denied in court, and they kept her children. So CPS initiated a petition in the court. The petition itself was not authorized, and CPS kept her children. And right now, in fact, is the 1-year anniversary of the abduction of her 3 children, and she hasn't even been allowed to see them because she's associating herself with me, and these allegations are coming at them with both barrels.
And what's her name again? What's her name again, Ted?
Danielle Austin.
Danielle Austin. Okay. We'll check. I'll look into that. I'll look into that case. It's not impossible. I might show up in Isabella County, Michigan.
That'd be great.
I've done that.
I'll put you up.
I've been there before on this case with his dad. Married the love of his life, found out she had a child by a scumbag, and then they awarded the scumbag custody because she was doing drugs, but they wouldn't let the dad, who wasn't the real dad, have the kid, but he had to pay child support for a kid, and they gave possession of the child to the real biological father and let the biological father collect child support from the non-biological father. I mean, this is just as insane can get. And the only solution I can see, Ted, is we need a militia that specializes in arresting CPS people when they do illegal, unlawful, criminal acts like this. And like the Wilbur Gaston case, where Hazel Spies made a kiddie porn video, which no one can see, but Wilbur got to see it in judges' chambers, and his daughter was taken from him, and when she said, Daddy didn't do anything bad to me, they made her, I'm talking Hazel Spies, on orders of Larry Lawson at the CPS headquarters in Oregon, ordered Hazel Spies to videotape his little 7-year-old girl, Melissa, told her to strip naked and masturbate, and then say, Daddy makes me do this dirty dance. And instead, I heard an audio version of that. Somebody in one of the office made an audio version, and they played it for me over the phone, and I was blown away. The little girl at 7 said, Daddy, don't make me do the dirty dance. You make me do the dirty dance. The little girl was 7 years old, and she had only had 18 months of her life with her father, her real biological father. And yet they tried to criminalize Wilbur. He was found not guilty by a jury. And I got that video, even though they said it had been destroyed in a flood. It hadn't. But I got that video, and that's on YouTube. But she's now 23 years old. They've made her an adult invalid and said she can never be free. She's going to be a ward of the state for life, and someone gets paid, because if she ever got freedom, I'm talking about Melissa Gaston up in Oregon, if she ever got freedom, she would be entitled to sue the whole bunch of them, the CPS, whole outfit, all their former employees that helped Hazel Spees, she's now a retired first grade school teacher. And I've got Hazel on video admitting what she did. And it's on YouTube. Have you seen that, Ted?
No, I haven't seen that yet, but I'm going to be spending some time at your channel here.
Yeah, go look at that. It's got 100,000 views.
You should take a look at the Daniel Huston case on my YouTube channel, too. It
I will.
goes into detail, and we show the paperwork that I'm talking about here, and we just break it down. I mean, the militia could come here for that instance alone, and I've got at least a dozen other items that they should be here taking a look at what's going on here in Michigan.
Well, I agree. The militia, calling for the militia, people. Here's a time in Isabella County, we need a militia. I think it would be helpful if you had a We the People grand jury of 25 people that made a formal indictment and took their oaths of office and recorded their oath of office and did all that paperwork correctly first, and then called for the militia. Then I think they'd be standing on firm ground because of that case, U.S. versus Williams, 504 U.S. 36, where Supreme Court Justice Antoine Scalia said there's a fourth branch of government. It's we the people have the right, without an appointment by any judge. I'm talking about the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Scalia said this in 1992. So,
I'm very familiar with that.
but Bundy skipped the grand jury. He just went straight to the militia. And it worked for him, and he's satisfied with that. I wish he would get him a grand jury, and go after damages. The question is, what court would enforce the damages? I think we're on the edge of full-blown civil war. And it will only take...
When our state's second highest court, the Michigan Supreme Court, second highest to we the people, when our state's highest court is willfully participating in the obstruction of justice and the misprision of felony, we've got some issues here in Michigan. Without a doubt.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I will look at Daniela Austin's on your YouTube channel. Send it to me on Facebook, please.
Okay.
I will look at it. We're down to 2 minutes. We have to sign off the air. People, I hope you've been watching. I'm sorry we didn't have an image of Ted Visner in Isabel County to put up here, but we'll have his image here for the YouTube when this goes up on YouTube. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. And I'm really not a radical. I'm really a very conservative person that just wants the Constitution upheld and find that we have nobody to force it.
That's exactly right.
And Ted finds that, and I've never met Ted. But I have never met Mr. Grabsky in Florida face-to-face either. But we're finding people all over this country who should be holding these sheriff's offices, who should be holding the county supervisors' seats, and they're not, because the elections are stolen. Your only vote that counts now is your vote on a jury to acquit or convict somebody, and your vote on a grand jury to indict somebody or to return a no bill. I just got to point out again that there were 2 grand juries that returned no bill of indictment against Michael Jackson before he finally loaded up a grand jury with enough friends that would give him a grand jury indictment against Michael Jackson. And then the jury of all white people found that very black man completely innocent. I'm William Wagner here. I wanted to show you what Renee, hang on, we'll be going off the air here in less than a minute. I want to talk to you. I wanted to show you what Renee Powers just posted. It's got to do with, I wish we could bring that up, but I think the screen's gone dark. But it's got to do with Anthony Williams being falsely arrested again this time in Florida while he's trying to get a judge indicted that should have never been on the bench. And I'll post that in YouTube. I'm William Wagner saying thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We got to cut away. There's another program coming up right after mine. Stay tuned on your public access channel where you get truth you can't get anywhere else. Thanks for watching.